Okay, if you've been around me very long, you know that I'm, not a so-called negative Nancy by any means, but I do talk openly about not liking the creative writing classes that I took back when I was working on my first novel. And I often share why, because of the feedback model. But I rarely speculate about why specifically the feedback model of writing instruction is so destructive to new writers. So in this video, I'm gonna get concrete about a primary reason I think that most creative writing classes, the way they tend to be designed and taught, are so bad. Let's go. Here's how it often works. When a writer is hired to teach a creative writing class, it's because they've published some work. It's never because they have a process to teach. No one ever vets them in that way. As a result, you often get instructors who have a publication record, but don't necessarily have a process to teach, or may have a process but don't trust themselves to teach it or know how to teach it. They aren't sure what to do with the class time, and so what they do with their class time is mimic the classes that they took. That typically means leading what in creative writing circles is called workshop. 90% or more of creative writing classes are still run like this, as a workshop. You show up for class. In class, people, your classmates, submit pages to the group. Your peers read your pages, and then you have a workshop where all of you share your reactions to each other's work. You give each other feedback. Now, sometimes these reactions may be structured. The instructor might say, hey, everyone share one positive thing and one negative thing. And other times it's more of a free-for-all. You're just sort of allowed to react. This style of workshop, in which people from the class are giving each other feedback on their writing, is essentially useless. And I know that's a controversial statement, but I say this having been in these workshops for years and years, and having worked with many writers who have survived these workshops, but barely. Is it any wonder that in the novel writing classes that I took over the years, none of us actually wrote a novel by the end of the class? Now, I want to be clear that I don't blame the instructors of these kinds of classes just because they don't know how to come up with a curriculum or don't trust themselves to do so. They're inheriting a kind of model of creative writing instruction that has been passed down for generations, in spite of the fact that it is highly problematic in a bunch of ways that are finally coming to light. I'm not the only one pointing this out, although those of us who are still in the minority. A majorly problematic assumption of the feedback model, and one I want to talk about in this video, is that feedback is not something that any human can just inherently do, like have a beating heart or a soul. Feedback isn't something we are born knowing how to do. It is a skill. It is a skill that needs to be learned in order for the person dishing it out to do it well, to be useful, particularly to be useful to a new writer at the beginning of a drafting stage. To put it another way, giving constructive feedback to another human is a complex skill. You wouldn't go to a therapist who hadn't been certified in delivering the kind of therapy you were going to write. You wouldn't go to an acupuncturist who didn't know how to give acupuncture. The workshop model assumes that feedback from people who have not been trained to give feedback is a helpful thing for a writer. And I could not disagree more with that assumption. I think that improperly vetted and sloppily delivered feedback is so destructive early on, even when it's coming from people who are well-meaning. Intention has nothing to do with it. It can come from the most well-intentioned person on the planet. It's not that person's fault. They don't know what they don't know. They don't understand how much power they have to be destructive. Now, there are other issues with the feedback model of creative writing classes, but this is just a really big one that I've never really talked explicitly about, and so I wanted to here. So if you're taking creative writing classes and finding that you feel kind of bad at the end of them, I just want to tell you that you aren't crazy and the problem isn't you. So how should feedback be given if you find yourself in one of these kinds of writing classes that I'm talking about? Okay, well, here are just 3 tools for approaching a class like this if you're currently in one. Number 1, don't give feedback just because you're expected to. You don't want to be the cause of someone else's creative confidence being derailed for the next 5 years just because you left a critical comment on their first page of their first draft because you were trying to be a good student and be participatory. And this may mean you only leave 1 comment or 0 comments on a fellow student's 10-page submission. Okay, so be it. I think you're doing the right thing. You're doing the caring thing because you're knowing what you don't know and your own limitations, and you're respecting this precious thing that you're not trying to destroy, which is the other person's confidence and their story that is not even yet fully bloomed. Okay, my second suggestion, don't read your peers' work in these classes as if you are their editor. You aren't. Your job is not to find the problems. You are a reader of a first draft, usually, in these classes. So read like you're rooting for them, like you're looking for the glistening gems that they haven't noticed yet. Point out those gems. Share what you're wondering, what makes you excited or curious, not what you would write differently. It's not your book, so it doesn't matter what you would write differently. I know no one has probably never told you this, which is why I am. If you think Diane's romance should be literary fiction, maybe keep that to yourself. Diane wants to write romance. And my last suggestion, number 3, finally, if you don't read the genre that your peer is writing, consider sitting this one out. Unless you feel confident that you can pose genre-neutral questions that are both inquisitive and supportive, maybe just don't give feedback. For example, I don't read fantasy, so I'm not a very good reader of fantasy. Mostly. It's as simple as my colleague Harrison once put it. If you don't like grapefruit, don't sign up to test grapefruit soda. You're not the right person for that job because you're not gonna like it. I hope this was helpful. Now, speaking of writing and writing a book, are you writing a book or do you want to? Because if so, I would love to hear from you. When I'm not writing, I run a 12-month MFA alternative called the Book Incubator. If you're curious to know more, I have a free video walking you through my 4 notebooks method for writing a novel, and you can get it by applying to the Book Incubator. Just go to thebookincubator.com. The application is only 2 questions. It'll take you under 5 minutes. And if you're accepted, I'll send you that free video training. I really hope to hear from you.